For most of my adult life, I believed generosity could build love. I believed that if I stepped in during every crisis, paid every bill, and filled every gap, my family would one day look at me with the same warmth they so freely offered one another. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself this was what a good daughter and a good sister were supposed to do. At first, it felt noble. Later, it felt expected. Eventually, it felt like slow suffocation disguised as loyalty. But I kept going because stopping felt like betrayal, and I had been taught since childhood that keeping the family together was my job, even if the job destroyed me. My small house in Denver was the one place where I felt steady. It sat at the end of a quiet street lined with elm trees, the kind of street where neighbors waved from their porches and dogs barked at the mail truck. Inside, the walls were painted a soft gray, a color I chose because it reminded me of early mornings in London when the sky looked gentle and forgiving. The kitchen window faced the rising sun. My bedroom smelled faintly of lavender because of the spray I used at night. I loved my home, but the moment my phone buzzed, the peace dissolved. The calls were always the same. Trouble. Panic. Urgency wrapped in guilt. My mother had perfected the tone. My brothers had perfected the timing. Sweetheart, I hate to ask, but hey, you know I wouldn't reach out unless it was serious. If you could help just this once. But just this once had turned into years. Years of paying for car repairs, medical appointments, rent shortages, sudden trips, overdue loans, and random whims that weren't emergencies at all. I became the one they leaned on, not because I was strong, but because they knew I wouldn't say no. Looking back, I see how easy it was for them, how none of them ever asked if my own bills were heavy or if my job was stressful. I was the helper, the bank, the reliable one. And they treated reliability like an endless well. Everything reached its breaking point on my 32nd birthday. My mother insisted we celebrate properly, which should have been a warning. We met at a high-end restaurant in the middle of downtown. I arrived early and waited outside, adjusting the sleeve of my dress and trying to convince myself that maybe this time would be different. Maybe they would show up with kindness instead of expectation. When I stepped inside, I immediately saw the truth written on their faces. My mother's smile was thin, calculated, the kind she wore when she had already decided what she wanted from me. Mark lifted his glass in my direction without standing. Jason nodded once, already half checking his phone. No one hugged me. No one even said happy birthday until I sat down. It felt like entering a play where everyone knew their lines except me. From the start, I could sense the tension hovering beneath the surface. They ordered the most expensive wine without asking if I wanted any. They chose appetizers before I opened the menu. My mother made an offhand comment about how successful I must be to afford a place like this, even though I hadn't chosen it. My brothers laughed at jokes that hinged on the idea that I had the most money, therefore I should handle everything. I sat there feeling like a visitor in my own family, someone invited only because I came with a credit card. Dinner dragged on. They continued ordering dishes that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The conversation circled back to their usual complaints, each one ending with an indirect hint at needing help. They talked about rent increases, car trouble, medical fees, and the cost of living. Not once did they ask how I was. Not once did they ask about my job, my friends, my interests, or my life. To them, I was a resource, not a daughter or a sister. Somewhere between the second bottle of wine and the overpriced dessert trio, something shifted inside me. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It was quiet, like the click of a lock. I looked at the people sitting across from me, the people I had spent years trying to please, and I understood with absolute clarity that they did not see me at all. They saw what I could give. Nothing more. When the bill finally arrived, the server placed it directly in front of me, as if trained by years of practice. My mother didn't glance at it. My brothers didn't reach for their pockets. The act was so smooth, so normal to them, that for a moment I felt almost dizzy. All these years, I had been playing a role without ever realizing I had the power to walk off the stage. I stared at the bill long enough to steady my breath. Then I slid it back toward myself, took out my card, and quietly paid only for my own meal. The amount felt small compared to the freedom it purchased. When I stood, the chair scraped lightly against the floor. My mother froze. Mark frowned. Jason looked confused. I placed my napkin on the table and said the softest words I have ever spoken. "I'm done." They blinked at me as if they had not heard correctly. But I didn't repeat myself. I didn't explain. I didn't wait for protests or guilt or theatrics. I simply picked at my purse, pushed in my chair, and walked toward the door. The night outside was cold, but the air felt cleaner than anything I had breathed in years. I could hear the city buzzing behind me, cars passing, laughter spilling from bars, music drifting down the street. But inside me, there was silence. A good silence. A peaceful silence. A silence that told me I had just taken my first real step toward a different life. For the first time as an adult, I did not feel afraid when I walked away from them. I felt free. In the days after that night, my world felt strangely quiet, as if someone had lowered the volume on a life that had always been far too loud. I kept waiting for panic to hit me, the type of panic I had felt for years whenever I imagined disappointing my family. But instead, there was a slow, uncertain calm. It wasn't peace yet, but it was the beginning of it. I woke up that first morning and realized my phone hadn't buzzed once. No frantic messages. No guilt soaked in sweetness. No claims of emergencies that somehow always required my wallet. It was silent, and it unnerved me. I had spent so long reacting to every crisis that stillness felt unnatural, almost dangerous. The first few weeks were the hardest. I kept questioning myself. Was I heartless? Was I dramatic? Was I abandoning them? These thoughts roamed through my mind like restless ghosts, whispering every insecurity my family had planted in me over the years. For so long, they had defined me through their needs. Being useful was the only role they ever let me have. Without that role, I didn't quite know who I was. Even my home in Denver, usually my sanctuary, felt unfamiliar. I would walk from room to room, seeing the soft gray walls and sunlight pooling on the floor, and I would think, this is mine. This piece is mine. But a part of me kept expecting someone to snatch it away. I knew I needed support, someone who wasn't tangled in the knots of my past, someone who could help me understand what I had been carrying. That was how I found Ellen, a therapist with calm eyes and a voice that made me feel safe in a way I didn't know therapy could. During our first session, I sat on her couch and realized I had no idea how to talk about myself without apologizing. Every time I mentioned something painful, I softened it with excuses for my family. The tears surprised me when they came. I hadn't cried in front of another adult in years, and certainly not about myself. Ellen didn't tell me what to do. She told me what I had lived through. She used words I had never applied to my experience: manipulation, emotional conditioning, and financial coercion. Hearing her say those words felt like opening blinds in a dark room. I could finally see the shape of my childhood and adulthood, the way every act of helping had been pushed, expected, even demanded. She told me that stepping back wasn't selfish. It was necessary. With her guidance, I began creating a new routine. I started taking morning walks through my neighborhood, letting the cool Denver air clear my mind. I cooked simple meals for myself without rushing, without thinking of anyone else's needs. I stopped checking my phone constantly. At first, it felt unnatural. My hands kept reaching for my phone as if it were an oxygen tank. But slowly, that urge faded. One of the first things Ellen encouraged me to do was get honest about my finances. I opened my banking app, something I usually avoided unless I had to send money to someone else. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what I would see. I tracked every dollar, separating needs from habits. I rebuilt my emergency savings little by little. I started putting aside money for my future instead of someone else's present. I even met with a financial advisor who helped me create a budget that didn't revolve around other people's crises. Around the same time, I received a promotion at work. It came with an $8,000 raise, and the moment I read the email, I sat in my car, stunned. Tears fell before I could stop them. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the validation. I had achieved something entirely on my own, without having to prove anything to anyone. It felt like a small but powerful victory. Then came something I never expected: travel. I booked a ticket to London, a place I had always imagined but never dared to visit. I told no one. Not my mother. Not my brothers. Not even most of my friends. I just went. Walking through the old streets, crossing bridges lit by soft yellow lights, breathing in the chilly night air, I felt something inside me expand for the first time in years. Freedom felt like cold air on my cheeks and the weight of no one expecting anything from me. But my silence didn't go unnoticed back home. My mother began posting vague, dramatic messages online, the kind meant to draw sympathy. She told distant relatives that I had become cold and ungrateful. She painted herself as a devoted mother abandoned by her selfish daughter, never mentioning the years she had treated me like a lifeline she didn't want to maintain. Reading her posts felt surreal, like watching someone rewrite my life in real time. My brothers were louder and less subtle. Mark sent long messages dripping with guilt, telling me I was heartless for turning my back on family and reminding me how much they depended on me. Jason tried another tactic entirely. He accused me of forgetting where I came from, of thinking I was better than everyone else. When that didn't work, they crossed a line. They tried to open small accounts using my name and information. The moment I discovered the attempted fraud, everything in me hardened. I filed the necessary reports, shut down any access they might have had, and blocked their numbers. I didn't warn them.
I didn't ask them why.
I simply cut the cord. And the world didn't end. Nothing fell apart when I said no. Instead, everything began falling into place. My life grew quieter. My breathing grew steadier. My mind felt clearer. The ground beneath me, which had always felt shaky, suddenly felt solid. I was learning what it meant to stand without bending, to choose myself without drowning in guilt. The first steps away were shaky, but they were mine. And step by step, I was finally moving toward a life that belonged to me. The more distance I created, the more desperate their attempts became. It was almost eerie, the way silence made them louder. For years, I had been the one bending, shrinking, and giving until I had nothing left. Now that I was no longer available on command, they scrambled to pull me back into the old patterns. It was like watching a structure crack after losing the support beam it had leaned on for too long. My mother was the first to react. She turned herself into a victim almost overnight. Suddenly, her social media was full of long messages about losing her child to the world and trying her best as a single mother, even though she had spent more time criticizing me than caring for me. She told distant relatives that I had become cold and selfish. She said I was too good for the family now that I had a little money. She never mentioned the years she had drained me financially or emotionally. Her version of reality always placed her at the center, glowing with martyrdom. Friends of the family began reaching out to me with concerned messages, asking if I was all right, repeating her words as if they were gospel. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. Even from a distance, she still managed to twist my actions into something ugly. But the difference now was that I saw the manipulation clearly. I no longer spiraled into guilt. Instead, I felt tired. Tired of years of being misrepresented. Tired from carrying a role that had never belonged to me. My brothers reacted in their own ways. Mark began sending dramatic messages about serious emergencies that always needed money. When I didn't reply, he shifted to guilt, telling me I was abandoning my own blood. Jason tried anger first, sending long, late-night texts accusing me of thinking I was better than the family. When anger failed, he tried showing up at my house unannounced. I watched him through the window once, knocking on my door with the same entitlement he had shown my entire life. I didn't open the door. I simply stood there, silent, until he finally walked away. But their efforts told me something important. They were losing control and they knew it. Oddly, the person I expected to react the worst was the only one who approached me gently. My father. He and my mother had split when I was in high school, and after the divorce, he had faded into a background role. We never had a deep connection, but he had also never asked for anything. He reached out with short messages, the kind that didn't push. Hope you're okay. Thinking about you. Here if you want to talk. At first, I ignored him. I didn't know how to separate his quiet absence from the active harm of the others. But eventually, I agreed to meet him. We chose a small coffee shop on the edge of the city, a place with warm lighting and old wooden booths that creaked when you sat down. He was already there when I arrived, holding a mug with both hands as though it grounded him. When I sat across from him, he took a long breath before speaking. He didn't lecture me. He didn't defend my mother or my brothers. Instead, he apologized. He told me he knew he should have protected me better. He said he had seen the imbalance for years, but hadn't known how to fight my mother's grip on me. There was sadness in his voice, not self-pity, but regret. It didn't erase the past. It didn't fix everything. But it was more honesty than I had heard from him in my entire life. I didn't forgive him instantly. Trust didn't return with a single conversation. But I didn't close the door either. I left it cracked open, just enough for something new to enter if it chose to. While my family was unraveling in their efforts to pull me back, my own life began growing in ways I hadn't expected. I met someone through mutual friends, a man named David, with steady eyes and a gentle way of listening. He never made demands. He never asked me to justify my boundaries. If anything, he encouraged them. He told me it was brave to choose myself after years of being drained. He liked quiet Sundays, long walks, and simple meals shared without rush or tension. It felt different. It felt safe. My friendships deepened, too. Without the emotional weight of my family dragging behind me, I suddenly had space to nurture connections I had neglected for years. We cooked dinners together, shared stories late into the night, and celebrated each other's milestones. They became a kind of chosen family, one built on respect instead of obligation. My career also began to flourish. With newfound clarity and fewer emotional crises stealing my time, I performed better at work. I earned another bonus, hit personal savings goals I once thought were impossible, and reached 6 figures in my account by the end of the year. Every time I checked my balance, I felt something warm spread through me.
Pride.
Relief. Ownership of my life. But the biggest transformation happened inside me. My mind grew quieter. My breathing is steadier. My emotions are calmer. I no longer felt tangled in guilt every time I said no. I no longer felt defined by what I could give. My family's reactions no longer dictated my worth. It was as if the chains they had wrapped around me for decades had finally rusted and fallen away. One evening, after a long day of work, I sat on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sunset spill golden light across my living room. I realized something profound. My past wasn't a prison anymore. It was a place I had walked through, a place I had survived, but not a place I lived in. Their control had collapsed. Not because I fought them, but because I stopped feeding the system that held me captive. And in that collapse, I finally found the space to become someone new. A full year passed before my mother finally reached out again. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning while I was watering the small plants on my kitchen windowsill. The sunlight poured through the glass, warming the wooden floor of my new home on the edge of Denver. My phone buzzed once, and for a moment I felt the old instinct to brace myself, the instinct shaped by years of guilt and expectation. But when I picked it up, something inside me stayed steady. Her message was long, decorated with soft phrases she had never used with me before. She wrote about wanting to put the past behind us and start fresh as a family. The words had a gentle shape, but the meaning was sharp, unmistakable. I knew that tone by heart. She didn't want reconciliation. She wanted access. She wanted the old version of me back, the one who would drop everything to fund her life or fix her mistakes. For the first time, I read her message without feeling responsible. I didn't feel anger either. I just felt clarity, the kind that grows quietly and slowly, like a dawn you don't realize is happening until the room brightens around you. I replied with honesty. I told her that I wished her well. I told her that I hoped she found the support she needed. But I also told her I was not returning to the role she had created for me. I didn't explain further. I didn't defend myself. I didn't soften the truth to make her comfortable. The woman I used to be would have written a long apology, full of explanations and guilt. The woman I had become wrote 4 calm sentences. She didn't reply. She simply blocked me. No final words. No argument. No attempt at understanding. The silence that followed was the quietest ending to the loudest chapter of my life. And strangely, it brought no pain. Only relief. My brothers had already stopped trying by then. When guilt didn't work, they tried anger. When anger didn't work, they tried pity. When pity didn't work, they tried lies. When lies didn't work, they finally drifted away, searching for someone else to lean on. Watching them fade was like watching a storm move off the horizon. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't mourn it either. I simply accepted it. My father was the only one who remained in my life, but in a limited, gentle way. We didn't become close overnight. We didn't have deep emotional talks or try to fix every wound at once. Instead, we spoke every few months, usually over coffee or during short walks in the park. He asked how work was going. He asked if I was sleeping well. He never asked for money. He never pressured me. He seemed to understand that rebuilding trust required patience, not demands. Our connection was thin but real, like a small bridge rebuilt plank by plank. Meanwhile, my own life expanded in ways I never imagined. The new house I bought was more than a place to live. It was a statement to myself. Tall windows, soft curtains, shelves filled with books I had always wanted to read, a big couch covered in warm blankets, and enough peace to make me feel rooted for the first time in years. Every room felt like a fresh start. I decorated slowly, choosing only things that made me feel calm or joyful. It was the first time I created a home for myself instead of creating one that others could take advantage of. My friendships grew deeper, too. Without the constant emotional drain of my family, I had space to nurture real connections. My friends became my chosen family. We cooked meals together, took weekend trips, shared victories and frustrations, and supported each other in ways that felt mutual and healthy. They saw me for who I was, not for what I could pay for. And then there was David. Our life together didn't look like the dramatic romances people write novels about. It was quieter than that, steadier, softer. He loved slow mornings, fresh coffee, and the way sunlight hit the kitchen floor. He never made me feel small or guilty for setting boundaries. Instead, he admired them. He encouraged them. He told me he loved the woman I was becoming, the woman who knew how to protect her own peace. We built routines that felt like tiny celebrations of freedom. Evening walks, movie nights, Sunday mornings spent reading on opposite sides of the couch, laughing at the smallest things, eating dinner without feeling rushed or judged. There were no hidden expectations, no unspoken debts, no emotional traps. Loving him felt like breathing easily after years of holding my breath. My career continued to grow as well. Without crises pulling me away, I was able to focus fully on work. I took on creative projects, earned promotions, and built a financial foundation that was finally stable. I reached a point where I didn't just have savings. I had security. I had independence. I had a future that belonged solely to me. But the greatest shift happened inside me. I finally understood something that had taken me decades to learn. My worth was never tied to the dollars I handed out or the sacrifices I quietly swallowed. My value was not measured by how much pain I could endure to keep the peace.
I was not a bank.
I was not a crutch. I was not a tool for other people's comfort. I was a woman who survived a childhood of imbalance, an adulthood of emotional debt, and a lifetime of being used in the name of family. And I walked out of it stronger than I ever imagined. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains and cast warm gold across my living room, I curled up on my couch with a soft blanket and felt a sense of calm wash over me. This was my life, my space, my freedom. For the first time, I felt like my life truly belonged to me. And I chose, with full certainty, to keep it that way.